I would like to ask the Chief Minister if he will make a statement on the new climate change agenda.
Following the Chief Minister, Honourable Member for Malew, Mr Quayle.
Thank you, Mr President. I thank the Honourable Member for the opportunity to make a statement. As Honourable Members will know, I announced on Friday the 10th of May that we will be bringing forward a climate change bill which will be introduced into the branches in the next legislative year. We have taken on board the comments and concerns of our residents during the climate change mitigation consultation, and I look forward to working with all Tynwald members in developing this bill. The Climate Change Bill will commit this government and future administrations to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050, in line with the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report. This government recognises the climate change emergency that is facing the planet, and we are committed to acting on this. As I said last Friday, we are not about words, we are about actions that we take, and we will work with Tynwald members, the public and interested groups to put in place a comprehensive action plan to reach this achievable target. I expect to invite honourable members to workshops in the next few weeks to look at how we introduce statutory targets and to provide the statutory powers necessary to deliver this. Alongside the bill will be an action plan outlining key objectives to help us achieve this. The majority of recent increases in our carbon emissions come from residential properties, and we must identify ways to reduce this. Earlier this week, the Minister for the Environment launched a campaign to help improve energy efficiency in people's homes. An action plan will be laid before Tynwald in December. However, we believe there are a number of imminent actions we can take. These will be taking active leadership by establishing a cross-government climate change action team as a subcommittee of the Environment and Infrastructure Committee. New building regulations, which include the introduction of an SAP energy efficiency rating for homes with an escalating target for all new properties to be brought to July Tynwald. The launch of a retrofit competition for houses, the relaunch of the Energy Efficiency Grant Scheme and the banning of peat cutting within months. We will ban all fossil fuel boilers and new building housing by 2025, ban the sale of new fossil fuel cars by 2040 and install cycle racks and showers in all suitable public buildings, as well as introduce incentives for tree planting under the imminent revisions of the Agricultural Support Scheme. In addition, I would like to take the opportunity to announce a scheme that will aim to plant a tree on the island for every resident. I will be making a further announcement about this in June. We have received over 1,000 responses so far on the climate change consultation, and this feedback reflects the sense of urgency and willingness from the public to embrace climate change on the island. It's important to note that while we make progress towards this action plan, each one of us as individuals must continue to play a role in this too. I know how important this issue is to our younger generation, and just a few weeks ago I was presented with a petition from students at Ramsey Grammar School on single-use plastics. The action we take now is for their future.
Supplementary question, Mr Moorhouse.
Thank you, Mr President, and thank you, Chief Minister, for that level of detail. It included some really interesting things like the forest, which could be tremendously exciting. On January the 22nd, 2019, I asked about the priorities to be achieved before the next general election. The answer was short, but it included the line, "I came into politics with an aim to ensure a sustainable future for our island and young people." You've now gone further than that by starting to really elaborate on what you want to achieve. Now, one key thing in this movement has been the people out there. How can we ensure that movement, the people, that interest is actually brought together and used in a movement going forward to make this even more impressive?
Chief Minister.
Thank you, Mr President, and I thank the honourable member for his kind comments. I think, how can we do that? It's by listening. That's what we're here for. I've said in my speech that we will be working with Tynwald members in a workshop, and obviously they'll be getting lobbied by their constituents, and you will all have your own views. But it won't just be when we develop a plan, it will be listening to members of the public and organisations who take a keen interest in this topic. So it will be inclusive. I would also like to point out to the honourable member that we all signed up to the programme for government in 2016, where there are a number of action plans on the climate and making sure that this island continues to be beautiful and fit for the next generation and the generations going further.
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. Perhaps the Chief Minister could also tell us a little bit more about the surprising news of an apparently imminent deal over a wind farm in Manx Waters that was apparently announced this morning, and when he expects that will be online.
Chief Minister to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I haven't been involved in that, so I would expect the Department for Enterprise or DEFRA to be able to give you a competent answer. But I'm more than happy to share an email with you when I know more.
Honourable Member for Ramsey, Mr. Hooper.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I'd like to thank the Chief Minister for his statement. In his statement, he mentioned the relaunch of the Energy Efficiency Grant Scheme. In a question that I asked the Minister for the Environment last month, it turns out that out of 12,000 eligible households, the government has issued 2 energy efficiency grants. So will this relaunched scheme be a revised, enhanced, improved scheme, or is this just a marketing exercise?
Chief Minister.
It's not a marketing exercise, Mr. President. I think all of us in this Honourable House want to ensure that we play our part in reducing global warming and achieving the target of maybe a 1.5% increase rather than the 2-3% that we're staring down the barrels of. And if any members feel that there can be tweaking of any of our schemes going forward, then I'm sure the Minister for DEFRA, who's in charge of that scheme, will gladly take on board the views. But we are all, I've mentioned in my speech there will be workshops where everyone can have their view. I've always found that this government, this TIML, works well when we work together and we listen to one another and we come up with a strategy together. It's why the programme for government has been so successful and why I expect climate change discussions and policies to be the same.
Supplementary, Mr. Peake.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank the Chief Minister for his reply. He did mention in there that the residential CO2 output for emissions has increased since 1990. Could he tell us what percentage of increase there has been since 1990?
Chief Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. I haven't got the exact percentage. What I do know is, having looked at the graphs fairly recently, that car emissions are starting to go down, but the housing emissions are going up. And one of the main concerns is, I think, since 1990, the number of houses with central heating has doubled. And with an ageing population, the temperature in the house through the central heating has increased by a number of degrees. And obviously, this is something that we have to tackle. Hence, I raised the comment about residential.
Ms. August Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd just like to ask the Chief Minister, he's made mention of the climate change bill previously that may come about fairly soon, and just wondering whether or not we'd be looking to the UK or perhaps looking from further afield, and how ambitious he expects that our targets may be, as we're a small island and can move quite quickly. Thank you.
Chief Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, that's why we're going to have the workshops. We feel that the Climate Change Intergovernmental Panel Committee have set a target of 2050, and we feel that that is achievable if we work together. I think when members go to the workshop and they realise what's involved in reaching that target, it's not a straightforward, simple comment. Now, I know an honourable member has put forward that they will be making a motion to an amendment and a debate later on, and I thank them for the advance warning of that. So I think, in respect, I will obviously comment during that debate.
I'm taking 3 more supplementary questions in the knowledge that there is a debate on the subject later at the sitting. Mr. Peake.
Thank you, Mr. President. And just to help the Chief Minister here, this is the report from DEFRA that was shared with members a few months ago, and it shows then that residential properties, emissions from residential properties increased by over 5 times. So that's you can look at that at your leisure later on, Mr. Chief Minister.
Minister.
I thank the honourable member for drawing a report to my attention, but I have already read it. I'd remembered numerous items from it, but the 5 times bit, I knew it was serious, but I hadn't remembered the 5 times. So I thank him for sharing that with me, or reminding me.
The Archbishop mentioned a tree planting initiative before. Would he confirm that he would ensure as far as possible that as many trees as possible can be planted, but that they are local high-value species that will enhance our biodiversity immensely rather than imported alien stuff, and that in turn will have a critical impact on our climate change mitigation strategies?
Work permits for trees.
More immigrants.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank the honourable member for his comments, and just to let him know that, and the honourable court, that I've already had meetings with the Minister and his department, Chief Executive, to discuss this, and they are working on coming up with the correct type of trees. Obviously, we're talking about 85,000, and they don't have that amount, so they will start growing, but we may have to use the relevant trees and import some at the start whilst our own are growing. But obviously I will be giving greater detail of that next month.
Honourable Member for Middle, Mr Shimmons.
Thank you, Mr President. I welcome the Chief Minister's climate change announcement. Chief Minister, when I looked round the Timble parking spaces this morning, I saw many highly powered and highly polluting vehicles. I am assuming that if I were to look in 6 months' time, there will be a much more environmentally friendly selection of vehicles. Actually, there will be fewer vehicles as more members use active forms of transport or public transport. Does the Chief Minister agree that politicians should act as role models in this matter? Otherwise, the public will view this as a case of do as I say, not as I do.
Us was 13 minutes late as well.
I thank the honourable member for that, and obviously he's referring to my Jag. I also have 2 1.1 cars with low emissions, which I also use. So I think it is in all honourable members to look at how they run their lives, to see what they can do to improve. And I commend the Treasury proposal on support to help people buy electric bikes, which is, I know, a member of my family has taken on board already, and I may well take that on board too, but catching me in Lycra is a thing that is never going to happen. You'd be glad to know. But I think I know, following the visit from the students from Ramsey Grammar School, which I mentioned in my speech earlier on, I have instructed my office to look at the plastic water bottles that are in the Cabinet Office to see what we can do to replace them. So I think it's things we can do all the time, but I don't think I'll be putting a for sale sign up just yet on my beloved car, but I will and am reducing the amount of usage that it gets.